And so Alice Paul, we met earlier on in our first half of the course, leading the National Women's Party and the push for suffrage through direct action. Who are these social feminists? Where do they come from? What are their organizations?
Well, they're the group that have been pushing for protective labor legislation. They're also the group that founded or helped to found the Women's Trade Union League. They're the group that helped to establish equal rights feminism when working class women were pushing for the suffrage. They're basically rooted in the reform tradition of feminism that we've seen since the late 1890s. And that tradition evolves by World War I into the so-called Women in Industry Service, which is part of the federal government's apparatus during the war, and then becomes, in 1919, the Women's Bureau of the Department of Labor. The women around that Women's Bureau, and I'm thinking here of women like Mary Anderson, who chairs the Bureau, Elizabeth Christman, Agnes Nesta, you know, some of them trade unionists, and some of them come out of the working class, but others come out of the reform tradition. And all of these so-called social feminists, they respond to Mary Anderson's description of herself. You know, she says, I consider myself a feminist, but I'm a practical feminist, she says. And practical feminism, social feminism means we don't take absolute measures of what women need. We think about what particular women in particular groups need, and we take care of them. You might think about this if we thought about it in late 20th century terms, we think about this as the so-called difference equality debate. So by the time the 1972 Equal Rights Amendment, which says pretty much the same thing as the 1923 Equal Rights Amendment, but by the time it's reintroduced into Congress in 1972, that amendment is supported by equality feminists, but the difference feminists, who are now, relatively speaking, smaller in number, but still relatively significant, say, no, if you had equal rights for women, then women would lose the privileges that they now have and that come to them from bearing children, from needing everything from separate toilets to not to be drafted and so on. So the argument is an ongoing and continuing argument in the 20th century.